I stood in front of the ballroom entrance, staring at my reflection in the glass doors. For a moment, I barely recognized myself. The navy blue gown I wore wasn't expensive, but it fit perfectly. My hair was neatly styled, and for the first time in years, I felt hopeful. The invitation in my purse had come directly from my father. "I'd really like you to be there," he had written. It was only one sentence, but after years of distance, it meant everything to me. My father, Richard Collins, was hosting one of the biggest charity galas in the city. Business leaders, politicians, and wealthy investors would all be attending. Ever since he married my stepmother, Vanessa, I had slowly become an outsider in my own family. Invitations to holidays stopped coming, phone calls became rare, family photos appeared online without me in them. Still, when Dad invited me to the gala, I allowed myself to believe things might finally change. Maybe he missed me. Maybe he regretted letting our relationship fade. Maybe tonight was the beginning of fixing everything. I took a deep breath and walked inside. The ballroom sparkled beneath enormous crystal chandeliers. Soft music floated through the air, while waiters carried silver trays filled with drinks and appetizers. Guests laughed and mingled around elegant tables decorated with white roses. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Then I spotted my father. He stood near the stage speaking with several investors. His face lit up when he saw me. "Emily," he said, opening his arms. I smiled and hugged him. "It's good to see you, Dad. You too, sweetheart." The word sweetheart almost made me cry. For a few precious minutes, we talked about work, life, and old memories. It felt natural, like the years of distance had never happened. Then Vanessa arrived. Her smile disappeared the second she noticed me. "What is she doing here?" she asked sharply. The conversation around us immediately went quiet. Dad cleared his throat. I invited her. Vanessa's expression hardened. "You what?" "I invited Emily," he repeated. For a moment, I thought she would simply walk away. Instead, she stepped closer. The anger in her eyes made my stomach tighten. Guests nearby began pretending not to listen, while clearly paying attention to every word. "Richard, this event is important," Vanessa said. "It is," Dad replied. "Then why would you invite her?" The insult hit harder than I expected. I wasn't a stranger. I wasn't some random guest. I was his daughter. Dad shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Vanessa looked directly at me. "You have a lot of nerve showing up." My cheeks burned. "Dad invited me." She laughed bitterly. "That doesn't mean you belong here." Several people turned toward us. I wanted the floor to open beneath my feet. "Vanessa," Dad warned quietly, but she ignored him. "No, I'm tired of pretending." Her voice rose louder. "She's not family." The entire ballroom fell silent. I couldn't breathe. Every guest nearby was staring at me. The humiliation crashed over me like a wave. I looked at my father, waiting for him to say something. "Anything. Tell her she was wrong. Tell everyone I was his daughter. Tell security to leave me alone." Do something. Instead, he stood there frozen, silent. That silence hurt more than Vanessa's words ever could. She pointed toward the entrance. "Security." 2 guards immediately approached. "I want her removed." One of them looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am," now. The room watched as if it were entertainment. My hands trembled. I had never felt so small. I looked at my father one final time. His eyes met mine. For a second, I thought he would stop this. He didn't. That was the moment something inside me broke. Not my heart, my hope. Without saying a word, I handed my untouched drink to a passing waiter. I straightened my shoulders. Then I walked toward the exit on my own. No security escort needed. The silence behind me felt louder than any scream. Outside, the cold night air hit my face. Only then did the tears begin. I sat in my car and cried until there were no tears left. Eventually, I pulled out my phone and looked at my father's invitation. The words blurred through my tears. "I'd really like you to be there." I laughed bitterly. What a joke. With trembling fingers, I deleted the message. Then I made a decision. I would never again beg for a place in a family that kept pushing me away. Vanessa had publicly erased me that night. What she didn't know was that within 48 hours, the same people who watched my humiliation would be desperately trying to reach me. And when they did, I wasn't sure I would answer. The morning after the gala, I woke up with swollen eyes and a heavy heart. For a few moments, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of the humiliation. Vanessa's voice echoed in my mind. "She's not family." The words still stung, but what hurt most wasn't what she had said. It was my father's silence. I had spent years making excuses for him. I told myself he was caught in the middle. I convinced myself he loved me, but didn't know how to stand up to Vanessa. The gala destroyed those excuses. A father who truly cared would never have stood there while his daughter was publicly thrown out like garbage. The truth was painful, but it was also freeing. For the first time in years, I stopped waiting for him to choose me. Instead, I chose myself. I got dressed, made coffee, and opened my laptop. Unlike most of my relatives believed, I wasn't struggling. In fact, over the past 5 years, I had quietly built something remarkable. While my father's company dominated headlines, I had been working behind the scenes as a software developer and business consultant. Nights, weekends, and holidays had all gone into creating a logistics platform that helped manufacturers reduce shipping costs and improve supply chain efficiency. The project started as a side hobby. Eventually, it became a company, a very valuable company. Only a handful of people knew I owned it. I preferred it that way, no family drama, no expectations, no interference, just results. As I checked my emails, a new message appeared. The sender's name immediately caught my attention, Michael Bennett, one of the most respected investors in the country. My pulse quickened. I opened the email. "Emily, after reviewing your platform and recent performance reports, I would like to discuss a potential acquisition partnership. Our team believes your technology could transform several major industries." I read the message twice, then a third time. A smile slowly spread across my face. This wasn't some small opportunity. This was life-changing. 2 hours later, I joined a video conference with Michael and his executive team. The meeting lasted nearly 3 hours. By the end of it, they offered a partnership worth millions. I remained calm during the discussion, but the moment the call ended, I sat back in my chair and laughed. Not because of the money, because for the first time in my life, I had undeniable proof that I didn't need anyone's approval. Not Vanessa's, not my relatives, not even my father's. Everything I had built belonged to me. That afternoon, lawyers began preparing documents. The agreement would be officially announced later in the week. Until then, everything remained confidential, exactly how I preferred it. Meanwhile, across town, my father's family knew nothing. Social media was filled with glamorous photos from the gala. Vanessa posted dozens of pictures, designer dress, perfect smile, luxury decorations, captions about family values and community leadership. The irony was almost funny. Family values. The woman had screamed that I wasn't family in front of hundreds of people. I nearly deleted the app altogether. Instead, I closed it and returned to work. The next day moved quickly. Conference calls, contract reviews, strategic planning. By evening, the partnership was nearly finalized. Then another unexpected email arrived. This one came from a business analyst I knew personally. The subject line caught my attention immediately. "Urgent, Collins Corporation supply crisis." My stomach tightened. Collins Corporation was my father's company. I opened the report. The deeper I read, the more shocked I became. Several major suppliers had terminated agreements. A critical logistics system was failing. Investors were growing nervous. Without a solution, the company could face enormous financial losses. I stared at the screen, then I noticed something else. The exact technology they desperately needed was the platform I owned. The same platform Michael Bennett's company was preparing to invest millions into. For a long moment, I simply sat there. The timing felt almost unbelievable. 48 hours earlier, I had been publicly humiliated and thrown out of a ballroom. Now I possessed the one thing capable of saving the family business. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I simply continued reviewing documents because, for once, their problems weren't my responsibility. As the sun disappeared beyond the city skyline, my phone buzzed on the desk, then it buzzed again and again. The screen lit up with a familiar name, Dad. I watched the phone ring until it stopped. A few seconds later, another call appeared. Then another. Something told me this was only the beginning. Soon, everyone who had ignored me would suddenly remember I existed. By the third morning, my phone looked like it had gone completely insane. I reached for it on my nightstand and froze. 68 missed calls. For a moment, I thought there had been some kind of emergency. Then I started reading the names. Dad, 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 Vanessa, Dad, Uncle Mark, Aunt Susan, Dad again, several company executives from Collins Corporation, even cousins who hadn't spoken to me in years. I stared at the screen in disbelief. It was amazing how quickly people remembered your existence when they needed something. The same family who had ignored birthdays, skipped invitations, and watched me get humiliated at the gala now seemed desperate to talk. I set the phone down and walked to the kitchen. Coffee first, drama later. As the coffee brewed, more notifications appeared. Voicemails, text messages, emails. The flood seemed endless. Finally, curiosity got the better of me. I opened one of Dad's messages. Emily, please call me. It's important. The next one sounded more urgent. We need to talk. Then another. Please answer your phone. I almost laughed. 3 days ago, he couldn't find the courage to say a single word while Vanessa threw me out. Now suddenly, every word was important. I deleted the messages and continued drinking my coffee. A few minutes later, my phone rang again. Dad, this time I answered. There was silence for a second, then a relieved sigh. Emily. His voice sounded exhausted. What do you need? I asked. The question clearly surprised him. Can we meet? Why? Another pause. It's complicated. No, Dad, it isn't. His breathing grew heavier. I know you're angry, I said quietly. That's what you think this is, Emily. You stood there while your wife told an entire ballroom that I wasn't family. He didn't respond. Because there was nothing to say, the truth rarely leaves room for excuses. Finally, he cleared his throat. The company is facing some challenges. There it was, not an apology, not regret, business. I leaned back in my chair. What kind of challenges? A logistics issue. I smiled despite myself, of course. The irony was almost perfect. Our advisors discovered that your software platform may be able to help. May be able, it absolutely could. The platform my team created had already solved similar problems for multiple corporations. The difference was that those companies had treated me with respect. Dad continued speaking. Several investors mentioned your name. I remained silent. We need a meeting. The word need stood out. Not want, need. For years I had been optional. Now I was essential, interesting. I said, Emily, please. Before I could answer, another call came through. Vanessa, I declined it. Immediately she texted, we need to talk. A second message followed. Families should support each other. I actually laughed out loud. Families should support each other. Where had that philosophy been at the gala? Where had it been during holidays? Birthdays, graduations, years of exclusion. The hypocrisy was almost impressive. By lunchtime, the calls continued. Executives reached out. Lawyers reached out. Relatives reached out. Everyone suddenly had something nice to say. One cousin even texted, You've always been an important part of the family. I stared at the message, then deleted it. People often confuse kindness with weakness. For years, I had forgiven things I never should have forgiven. I had accepted treatment I never should have accepted. Those days were over. That afternoon, my assistant entered my office holding a folder. The Bennett partnership is finalized. I smiled. Excellent. The official announcement would be released the next morning. Once the news became public, everyone would understand exactly how much leverage I possessed, not because I wanted revenge. Because facts were facts. I'd built something valuable, something real, something nobody could take away from me. As evening approached, my phone rang again. This time it was Vanessa. For some reason, I answered. The silence lasted several seconds. Then came a voice completely different from the woman at the gala. Soft, careful, almost sweet. Emily. I nearly didn't recognize her. What do you want? We got off on the wrong foot. I closed my eyes. The wrong foot, as if publicly humiliating someone was a misunderstanding, as if screaming "she's not family" was an accident. "We should sit down together," she continued, "your family." The words hit me like a punchline. 3 days ago I wasn't family. Now I was. Amazing what a multi-million-dollar business problem could do. I looked out the office window at the city lights below. For years I had wanted acceptance. Now they wanted access. There was a difference, a very important difference. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to ignore it. Tomorrow we would finally meet, and everyone would learn that the girl they pushed aside was the one holding all the cards. The next morning, the announcement became public. Every major business publication carried the story. Emily Collins signs multi-million-dollar partnership with Bennett Global Ventures. By noon, my inbox was overflowing. Congratulations from clients, messages from investors, interview requests from reporters. The company I had spent years building in silence was finally being recognized. And judging by the nonstop ringing of my phone, my family had seen the news too. At 3 o'clock, I arrived at the meeting location, a private conference room overlooking the city skyline. I had chosen neutral ground for a reason. No family home, no corporate headquarters, no place where anyone could claim authority. When I entered the room, Dad was already there. Vanessa sat beside him. For the first time since I had known her, she looked nervous. Neither of them stood when I walked in. They simply watched me take my seat across the table. An uncomfortable silence settled between us. Finally, Dad spoke. "Congratulations on the partnership." "Thank you." He nodded awkwardly. "I've been reading about your success." Success? Interesting. For years, he barely asked about my career. Now he had apparently become very interested. Vanessa forced a smile. "We always knew you'd do well." I nearly laughed. No, they hadn't. If they truly believed in me, they wouldn't have treated me like an inconvenience. They wouldn't have erased me from family gatherings, and they certainly wouldn't have thrown me out of a gala. I folded my hands on the table. "You didn't ask me here to discuss my success," and neither answered immediately. That told me everything. Dad sighed. "Our company is facing serious challenges." "I know." His eyes widened slightly. "You know, I've seen the reports." The room fell quiet again. Vanessa leaned forward. "The logistics failures are costing us millions." I remained expressionless. "And we need your platform." There it was, the real reason for the meeting. No pretending, no fake concern. No sudden family reunion, just business, the thing they needed. Dad looked ashamed. "We'd like to negotiate an agreement." I studied his face. For a brief moment, I saw the father I used to admire. The man who taught me to ride a bicycle. The man who attended my school plays. The man who once promised he would always protect me. Somewhere along the way, that father had disappeared. Or maybe I had finally stopped imagining he was still there. Vanessa cleared her throat. "Emily, we know things haven't always been perfect." I raised an eyebrow. "Not perfect." Her expression tightened. "You know what I mean." "No." I replied calmly, "I don't." She looked away. For once, she couldn't hide behind excuses. The memory of that gala hung heavily in the room. Finally, I spoke. "You told an entire ballroom that I wasn't family." Neither of them responded. "You had security remove me." Still silence. I turned to Dad. "And you said nothing?" The disappointment on his face deepened. "I know," he whispered. "No," I said, "I don't think you do." For years I had carried the pain quietly. Not anymore. "Do you know what hurt most?" It wasn't her words. Dad looked down. It was realizing that protecting your comfort mattered more than protecting your daughter. The room became completely silent. Vanessa opened her mouth but quickly closed it again. There was nothing she could argue with. The truth was sitting right there between us. Dad's eyes filled with regret. "I'm sorry." For a second, I believed he meant it. Maybe he did, but apologies don't erase choices. And consequences don't disappear because someone finally feels guilty. I reached into my briefcase and placed a folder on the table. Dad looked confused. "What is this?" "The future." He opened it. As he read the documents, his face slowly fell. Vanessa leaned closer. Then she gasped. "The partnership agreement, the exclusive licensing deal, the long-term contracts." Everything was already finalized. My technology had been committed elsewhere, legally, permanently. Their company had no access. Dad stared at the papers. You already signed. Yes. The realization hit both of them at once. They had waited too long. Vanessa looked stunned. You could have helped us. I met her gaze calmly. I could have. The room fell silent again. Then I stood, not angry, not bitter, just finished. The difference between us, I said, gathering my things, is that I built relationships with people who valued me before they needed me. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to say. As I walked toward the door, Dad called my name. I paused but didn't turn around. I'm proud of you, he said softly. A year earlier, those words would have meant everything. Now they simply arrived too late. I walked out of the room and into the sunlight. The sweetest revenge wasn't watching them lose. It wasn't making them suffer. It was realizing that I no longer needed their approval to be happy. For the first time in my life, I belonged exactly where I was. And this time, nobody could take that away from me.